In this video, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the integumentary system. Now, an integument is a tough protective layer. So this system consists of the outermost protective layer on the human body. There are three main components of the integumentary system of the human body. Most of it is skin, and that actually is the largest organ by surface area, by square inches. But also hair and nails are included in the integumentary system. When we think about the skin, it's made up of three different layers of tissue: the epidermis, the dermis, and then the subcutaneous. Now, these are the terms that our book uses, so it's the one that I'm using. But the subcutaneous is also called the hypodermis, and the epidermis and the dermis together can be called the cutaneous. So our textbook happens to be sort of mixing terms here. There are several key functions of the integumentary system. It is the first line of protection from injury and infection. It is a barrier between our tender body cells and this outside world that's full of germs and things that could do us harm. It's also extremely important in controlling the heat in the body, thermoregulation. If the sun shines on your skin, it can help produce vitamin D, which is a crucial vitamin for health. The skin contains nerves that can sense touch or pressure or changes in temperature or indicate pain when something gets damaged. And it is involved in getting rid of or excreting certain substances, a little bit of urea, but especially salts and water, which you may be very familiar with when you sweat. So let's start with this top layer, the epidermis. It is made up of stratified squamous epithelial cells, and hopefully you remember what that means, that we have layers and layers of flattened cells on the outer surface. It is a dry membrane. Most of your body is pretty moist. Remember, you are a lot of water in and around your cells, but this outer layer of your skin is very, very dry. The surface cells are not only dry, but they're actually dead, and they're filled with keratin, a type of protein. So they're keratinized or keratinized. And that, again, adds to the toughness and the protection function of the skin itself. The epidermis is the thinnest on your eyelid and thickest on the palm of your hand and the sole of your foot. I think you can kind of figure out why those are the thinnest and thickest parts of your body. The epidermis has between 15 and 30 individual layers of squamous cells, and these can be subdivided into 4 or 5 other layers. But I want to just focus on 2 in particular. The outermost layer that I already mentioned that has these dead cells full of keratin, or the stratum corneum. But at the other end, at the beginning of the lifespan of the cell, we have the stratum basale, which are the stem cells, the cells that are the parent cells that are making new skin cells way down at the bottom of your epidermis, which is actually not all that thick when you think about the whole scheme of things. These cells sit on a basement membrane, a layer of collagen fibers, which is a protein fiber. And as they divide and create new daughter cells, those daughter cells go into the next layer up. And then over time, these move up from the stratum basale up to the top of the surface, to the outer layer of your skin, the stratum corneum. In that whole process, as these cells are maturing, they grow and develop, and then eventually start getting filled up with keratin. They're called keratinocytes or keratinocytes at that point, when they're making all of that keratin to basically stuff themselves full and die, and then reach that outer layer of protection. Along with the cells, the living cells for the epidermis, you also have melanocytes, which are the cells that give color to your skin. And so these are sort of colored light brown in this picture, and they're not really cuboidal in shape. They actually have little extensions of the cytoplasm that go off and in between these other epithelial cells of your skin. And but depending upon how many of these extensions they have, that has part of the reason that determines the color of someone's skin. And then you have other cells sort of wandering around, squeezing in between these cells that are involved in the immune response. These are called Langerhans cells, and they're a macrophage. They are a cell that can surround and eat bacteria or other foreign invaders to help keep you healthy. Moving on to the second layer of skin, underneath the epidermis, we have the dermis. And this is connective tissue, several different types of connective tissue. First, we have loose connective tissue on the uppermost layer underneath those layers of the stratified squamous cells, and then you have the basement membrane of collagen, and then we move into areolar tissue, which of course is going to have some fibroblasts, some of the cells that are going to make a number of different types of protein fibers, such as collagen or elastin or reticular fibers that will help sort of hold everything together. And then under the loose connective tissue, we have a thicker, dense, irregular connective tissue. Irregular meaning basically that the protein fibers of collagen and elastin and stuff are just basically going off in all directions. They're not all parallel to each other. The dermis is also the place for blood vessels. I didn't mention blood vessels at all with the epidermis because there aren't any. Epithelial cells don't have any vascularization. The nutrients that are being carried by the blood get to those cells strictly by diffusion. So in this illustration, the border between the epidermis and the dermis can kind of be seen here. And you see it has a very wavy, wiggly line. Those that ups and downs are called the dermis papillae, and that helps contribute to fingerprints and toe prints, I guess, if you have ever done a footprint. You see you have swirls and ridges on the bottom of your feet as well. But the movement of nutrients is going to travel from the dermis up to the epidermis, oxygen and glucose and other important things to keep those bottom layers of cells full of the nutrients they need, because they are alive. The top layer is dead, but the bottom layer is alive. And along with the connective tissue, the dermis is also the place where the hair and nail follicles live, various glands producing various things that we'll talk about a little bit later on, and the sensory cells that are part of your nervous system. And then underneath the dermis is the subcutaneous or the hypodermis layer. If you've ever heard of a hypodermic needle, now you know where that needle is poking into. The subcutaneous layer is also connective tissue made up of primarily loose connective tissue and adipose tissue or fat tissue. It also contains blood vessels. They're a little bit larger down here, so this is why a deeper cut will bleed more profusely if you injure yourself. There are cells known as mast cells, which promote the inflammatory response when you do get injured, which is a positive thing, even though swelling and redness and soreness is not something we think of as being positive. It is important to help your body heal. And various macrophages, again, cells that can eat bacteria or viruses or fungi that might come in through a break in the skin. Your subcutaneous layer is the connection between the upper layers of the dermis and the epidermis to the muscles that lay below that. Along with these three layers that make up our skin proper, we have various accessory structures, and I want to focus on the hair follicles, the nails, and the skin glands. So hair is important for a variety of reasons. It functions to provide us some insulation. Not so much if we were fully furred like animals are, but, there's a little bit of insulation provided to your head by the hair that lies on your head. Protection. Hair provides protection for catching dirt and debris, keeping it from going into your eyes or going down to your respiratory tract because you have hairs in your nose. In your nose, you also get some filtration from those hairs that trap particles and keep them from traveling down into your lungs. And inside your ear, in your inner ear, which is where you have your system of balance, there are hairs that help keep sending the nervous signals to help you stay in balance, along with helping you with actually hearing sound itself. The nails on the end of your fingers and toes provide some protection for the end of those digits and also help you grip things, or perhaps, if you have some itchy spots, help you get rid of that feeling of itch, get you some relief from the itching. Then skin glands are involved in oil production, which helps us keep water inside our bodies and helps keep our outer cells waterproof so they don't get washed away by water. Skin glands are also important with temperature regulation, which is done primarily through sweating and the constriction or dilation of blood vessels. And then specialized glands can produce milk for lactating people, and the earwax inside your ears is coming from a gland in your skin. Let's look a little bit more at hair follicles. Hair itself is made by epithelial cells. So the cells from the epidermis actually go down into the dermis and create the hair. So they're traveling down in this sort of poking down into the dermis. There are two main parts of the hair the hair itself, the hair follicle. The hair root, which is way down here on the bottom, is where cells are dividing. They're doing mitosis. And this is where new cells are being produced. And then these cells, just like in your skin, are being pushed up by new cells being constantly made in the bottom layer. And as they move up, they're getting filled with keratin, and the cells are eventually going to die. And so the hair shaft that comes out of the skin, whether it's on the top of your head or on your arms or your legs, is actually a dead cell full of keratin, that tough protein that gives it color and gives it strength. The color is provided by melanin. That's a particular protein. There are a couple different kinds of melanin. Some are more blackish and brownish in color. Some are more yellow and red in color. And the combination of the particular melanins you have inherited in your genes will determine how exactly the color of your hair is, and also your skin color. There also is a very, very small muscle attached to each hair follicle, the erector pili muscle, and this will allow the hairs to stand up when you get goosebumps, or to some extent when you get scared. You can see this pretty obviously in animals. If you have an animal that, when they're looking fierce and ferocious, they might have the hair stand up on the back there along the backbone. Or, a cat will puff out when it's frightened. But we have the ability to do the same thing. We just don't have very many hairs on our skin, so we don't really notice it. Nails are similar to hair in that the part that we see, the part that is coming out from underneath the skin, is actually made of dead keratinized cells. So that would be the nail plate. That's the part that we put polish on. We want our fingers and toes, fingernails and toenails, to look beautiful. And those cells are dead and full of keratin. They're not grouped in long, skinny, shafts, but in a thick plate side by side. So they're taking up more space. The nail plate rests on a bed of epithelial cells underneath. These cells are not keratinized. In fact, if you have cut your nail too short, or you've had a fingernail or toenail ripped off, you know how tender that particular skin is, because it's not protected by layers and layers of dead cells, which provide sort of a deadening effect, and we don't feel quite so strongly, which is a good thing. But the important part on your nail is this half moon white shaped lunula is what it's called. That is where the cells are mitotic. That is the nail root. That's where cells are dividing. That's where the new nail cells are being formed. And then as they slowly move up from, really it happens closer to the area where the skin touches on the cuticle. But as they move up into the nail plate, the cells have been filled with keratin and they are dead. So if you happen to lose a fingernail or a toenail, but you don't damage the lunula, this nail will grow back perfectly fine. But if damage happens to that area, the nail root, where the new cells are being formed, that's when you end up with a deformed nail. Then we get to the glands. There are a bunch of different glands that are found in the skin, or basically two categories. Sebaceous glands are the first one I'm going to talk about, and they produce sebum, which is an oily substance, which helps moisturize the skin and help keep it soft and pliable. It also contains an antibacterial agent, which can help, again, provide some protection because it retards any bacteria, keeps any bacteria from growing that may have landed on your skin. You can find sebaceous glands next to the hair follicles that produce the hair, or they can open directly onto the skin. We don't have any sebaceous glands on the palms of our hands or the soles of our feet, which would help keep us being able to grip things, because the oil would be providing too much slipperiness if we're trying to hang on to things. Overactive sebaceous glands are one of the reasons why teenagers especially can be prone to acne. So in this slide, we've cut through a hair shaft, but right next to it, these are the cells that are making up the sebaceous gland. Glandular cells are also epithelial cells. You can see these look kind of cuboidal in shape, kind of like little cubes. And so there would be, not shown on this slide because of how the cut, the transverse cut was made, but there would be a duct, there would be a tiny tube that would be delivering the oily sebum to the hair shaft. And so that's why your hair gets oily, because this oil is basically being delivered right to the hair. And then we have our sweat glands, or the sudoriferous glands. These come in two types. There are the eccrine glands, which produce that watery sweat that is found throughout the body. If you're getting hot, you sweat on your forehead, you sweat on your palms of your hands, you sweat on your back, you sweat everywhere. The sweat glands that produce this watery or aqueous secretion are found all over your body, and they respond to elevated body temperature because they're part of thermoregulation. And then there are other sweat glands that are known as apocrine glands, and the secretion that they give off is more than water because it actually includes small parts of the cell itself. And so it is a richer protein source, and it actually becomes a bacteria food. And so it is the sweat that is produced by the apocrine glands are the ones that develop a smell, an unpleasant smell, a body odor smell, that it's because the bacteria have been feeding on these bits of cell cytoplasm, and it is the bacteria that's actually making the smell. The apocrine glands are found in the axillary, or the armpit region, and also the genital regions. And they also, we think about this part of the body as getting sweaty when you're hot, but they also can sweat because of stress or because of sexual arousal, and it's not so much thermoregulation that you have your apocrine glands secreting things. Then finally, we have sensory cells, and this is just showing you a bunch of the different structures that you might have present in the skin. But these sensory cells basically allow us to feel touch or to feel pressure, temperature, and pain. There are different types of sensory cells with different types of structures. Sometimes it's just a free nerve ending, or other times it has a corpuscle, some other structure on the end of the nerve. And so the information that these sensory cells pick up goes back to your brain and your brain is able to interpret what is happening on the surface of the skin and tells you then, what you are experiencing. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about the regulation of body temperature, because the skin is very much involved in this whole process. Remember, your normal body temperature is around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. And that the homeostatic mechanism, homeostasis, depends on a sensor detecting something being out of balance, the control center making a decision, and an effector then responding to what the brain is telling the body what to do. So if your body temperature raises above normal, there'll be sensors in the skin that notice that and are going to send a message then onto the brain. The brain registers that increase in body temperature, and so it sends a message, an effect, to the blood vessels and tell the blood vessels to dilate, to open up, so that more hot blood is exposed on just under the surface of the skin. So the temperature of the skin becomes warmer so that evaporation can happen, that this heat can be released into the outer environment. And the sweat glands produce secretions, which then can evaporate and take some of that heat off the surface of the skin as that water evaporates. As a result, body temperature drops back down because the body heat is being lost to the surroundings, and then the brain, this negative feedback loop, will turn off the process of blood vessel dilation and sweating. In the reverse effect, if the body temperature drops below normal, the brain signals the blood vessels to constrict, to hold the body heat closer to the center of the body, to not let it escape off the surface of the skin. The sweat glands are told to remain inactive, and if the body temperature remains down low for too long, then you add the muscles quivering and shivering to add the action of contraction, which will generate heat in just the muscle fibers contracting. That requires ATP, and cellular respiration is going to go up, and heat is a byproduct of that. And so this generates body heat and again pushes your body temperature back towards normal. When it reaches normal, then the shivering will stop, the blood vessels will relax, not be so constricted, blood can flow closer to the surface. So, this relationship between sensing the changes in body temperature and what's happening to blood vessels in the skin and what's happening with sweat glands in the skin or muscles just under the skin are all very important components of our minute by minute control of body temperature to keep things within the normal body set point. So, that covers my overview of the integumentary system, just to give you a quick sense of how things work on your skin.